Good evening and welcome back to Poe Discussions with Carmen and Jeanie. I am Carmen Bolden.
And I am Jeanie Smith.
And we
We
are
are the
Poetastic
Poetastic Two.
2.
Why do you pause so long, woman? Good land. You're a teacher. You know the weight count is 2 and then you speak on 3. Okay, get with the program.
I'm a 3 person. Jeanie, you're always on odd numbers. I don't know what's wrong with you.
I don't like even numbers. I never have. It's weird.
All right. Do you want to introduce our very special guest tonight?
Absolutely. We have with us the wonderful author and artist, Miss Holly Knightley.
Yay!
Welcome, Holly.
Yes.
Hey, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, so excited to be here. As you guys know, I'm a big fan of podcasts and everything. As you said, my name is Holly Knightley. I'm a supernatural suspense author. I also write and illustrate children's book under the name Holly Michelle. I recently put out my book, Eye of Athena, which is an Edgar Allan Poe inspired novel, and it actually features Edgar Allan Poe as a character. And that was released, yep, there it is. It was released on his birthday on January 19th.
Yes.
Yay!
That's so exciting. That's so exciting. Do you want to also tell us a little bit about your novella that came out right before that?
Yeah, so I have a novella that is called Riley House, which actually I do have it here.
I
yeah,
I have it too.
Which
I was
basically,
prepared.
which is actually a really short, fun story. It takes about 2.5 hours to read. You can get it free if you sign up for my newsletter. Just you can get that at hollyknightley.com, which is so you can get that for free. It's a fun read. It has a little bit of Edgar Allan Poe in there for sure. You can definitely you'll see and hear the influence in that. And it's funny, it's because the house right through that window is actually inspired by it. So I have a haunted house.
Oh, cool.
My neighbor's house is also haunted. And when they were moving out, just like in the story, they asked me to basically house it this house.
So
I was going,
Holly, that's so cool. I did not know that. Okay.
yes, and essentially, I'm not giving anything away. It has to look like a haunted teacup. That teacup is actually in my house. It has the name on it and everything, which this is in the book. So yeah, so it was kind of inspired by real life events and just kind of twisted. So
nice. I did not know that. That just makes it even eerier. I'm like almost like got chills because I've read the story and I'm not going to give away any spoilers, but that's so cool.
Yeah, so it's actually like a true ghost story.
Yeah.
So in a way, like, I mean, does the house have a weird vibe there? Yeah. I mean, we have new neighbors now. It's one of those houses that people don't tend to stay in there that long.
Okay.
So yeah, that was fun. And to get to go into an old house and, have the keys and know no one is there is a pretty cool thing if you get a chance to do it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Old houses, even old or new, most houses, based on where they are erected, have some kind of ambiance about them that can be a little spooky. And especially if you live in a neighborhood, because you're in New Jersey, right?
Yep.
Yes. Okay. I always get those mixed up for some reason. But yes, you're in New Jersey. And
Jersey Devil.
Yes, the Jersey Devil. That's right.
I live on the street.
And every time I think of anything in that area, I automatically think of the Amityville Horror. The whole ghost story behind that and the suspense of that and all that. Because it's got some
yeah.
Whack vibes. What was the lady? Lizzie Borden? Yeah.
Oh yes.
Lizzie Borden gave her mother 40 whacks, and I'm like, oh, it's kind of like the Amityville Horror.
Yeah.
But in that area, that region, especially, no matter where you're at, you can find some of the most hair-raising ghost tales. Like just a few states away in Pennsylvania is the most haunted insane asylum that was operating up through the 1920s or 30s, if I remember.
Yeah, I think
before it finally closed down.
I think we went to that one in Philadelphia when we visited there. It's really cool.
I've never been there. But always they do a big thing for Halloween, and every year we're like, we're gonna do that, and we just never do. See, like my sister the sister that you guys have met has a very high sensitivity to the other world. I do not. Maybe I get like a sense, but I don't have a high sensitivity, but she does. So she's kind of like my partner in crime. So it's kind of like, she's like, if it's really haunted or has like negative energy, she gets all like the pressure, and she gets nausea, she gets everything.
Wow.
So we're kind of like, yeah, one day maybe.
Hey,
Yeah.
it
Hey,
could
that
be a
was
trip that we could all take.
exactly.
That'd be cool.
And that sounds like a great idea for a book, Holly. Like the,
Mhm.
you know, sisters and, you know, in paranormal crime or something like that.
Well,
There you
well,
go.
funny enough, I know we're here to talk about Edgar Allan Poe book. I
Oh,
just
and
finished.
we'll come back to him.
Yeah, I just finished a book. Actually, it's called Houses Have Secrets. If you sign up for my newsletter, I kind of already let that leak to my my followers on that, my readers. But basically, it's a funny story about, it's kind of like Adam's Family meets The Haunting of Hill House. So in that
Cool.
setup, basically this girl gets adopted by this weird quirky family who runs ghost tours out of their house.
Oh,
And she kind of
neat.
gets herself involved in this weird murder mystery when her, this is not giving away, it starts like this. It's like the Christmas Carol. She was dead to begin with. It starts with the death of her sister, which brings her back to this haunted house.
Oh, cool.
So,
Mm.
Oh,
and yeah.
we'll look forward to that one.
And there's a
Yeah.
taxidermized raven. Sorry, trying to get that out in there for you Poe people. So there's still Poe in that book as well. So that
Oh,
was
cool.
super.
Oh, very cool. Well, all right. Well, since you brought us back to Poe, Jeanie, I guess you did get us bird walking or raven walking, as we call it. But
I don't know what you're talking about.
we're always going to blame you for the digressions, and it's all good. It's Poe good.
They're
So,
called side streets. I call them side streets. That's what they are, you know,
okay.
because
But
everybody has side streets. Okay.
yes, but Holly,
Like
tell
you
us.
guys, yeah,
Yeah,
like
go
you
ahead.
guys always said, right? Edgar Allan Poe, he really is like the father of horror. So for
Yes.
me, every horror story, I don't like to call
Mhm.
myself a horror writer, but I do fall into the underneath that umbrella. You know, it's
Mhm.
definitely inspired by him. And in my book, Eye of Athena, it is basically the primary story that has influenced it for me is actually the Telltale Heart. And I know this is gonna sound really, really cliche and beating you out to the punch, but my favorite Edgar Allan Poe story is the Telltale Heart. I
Okay.
just think it's just awesome. I mean, it's great to hear people like do audio acting on it and see people perform it, but it's actually one of his stories where you don't even need that. I mean, it's like it jumps off the page for me personally, and I
Mhm.
really, really enjoy it. And there's a line right in the beginning, and I'm probably going to butcher this because I don't have it memorized, where he's trying to convince the narrator's trying to convince the reader like he's not mad, and he says like I hear I hear all the voices in heaven and in earth, and many voices in hell. And that kind of formed the whole premise of my book. I love the idea that this narrator thinks he's not crazy, but he's thinking he's getting these divine like influences, and he's
Mhm.
hearing things on earth. Well, what's on earth? Like these ghosts, right? And then maybe he's getting that demonic influence from hell. And to me, it also kind of brings the idea of like you know, like the angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other,
Mhm.
and kind of like
Mhm.
this kind of like stream of consciousness, which I play in this book too. Like, is what he's here, like, because my character is potentially he came back from an insane asylum. Yeah, they thought he was mad, but the character is convinced that he is not mad, and that's kind of like goes back to the Telltale Heart. And it kind of forms like, oh, is it in his head? Is it his consciousness? Like, or is it, you know, his conscious, like the Jiminy Cricket thing, or like what's actually going on? But it's all basically the foundation of the book is Telltale Heart.
Okay. That
Nice.
totally makes sense. I got a little bit of Fall of House of Usher vibes, you know, with the twins and, you know, just the brother sister a little bit. I mean, there were a lot of Poe stories and elements I picked up out of it. And I love the way when you pulled in Poe lines, how you italicized everything, and it blended so beautifully.
Mhm.
Yeah, like so with the story, like the idea of this is that it's set in 1826. So Edgar Allan Poe is a teenager. It's kind of that weird time before he joins the army. Is
Mhm.
was my goal with that timeline. Um, but the whole idea is that, you know, we're always, as Poe people are always like, oh, who inspired the story? What beautiful woman is Annabelle Lee about? Who is the Raven about? So in this, it's kind of like an alternative history where you're like, well, it wasn't actually about a woman. He was friends with this guy who may or may not be crazy, and he's inspired all of these stories. So it's through his friendship with his character named Kenneth Dahl where he kind of gets to experience all the things that he later writes about as an adult author. So he's kind of like, introduced it by this character. So that's fun for Poe people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So with the character Kenneth Dahl, because you and I have talked about him a little bit, just that I've mentioned how much I really enjoyed his character. I loved all the characters, but him specifically, just because he was so different, I felt like for that time frame. Did you have inspiration for like who he is?
Okay, I probably shouldn't admit this if you read this book, but there's a lot of me in Kenneth Dahl, right?
Okay.
So this book is through a young adult, or we call YA lens, right? So he deals with a lot of stuff that young adults deal with, like identity crisis and stuff like that. Who he is as a person, and he really struggles with that. But at the same time, he is a complete narcissist. So one of the fun things I did in this book, which I think most people pick up when they read it, is that very few characters have names because they don't matter to him. Because to a narcissist, only one person matters. So like even like the father's not named. He just calls him his father. His grandmother's not named. It's the grandma. So we have Athena, his love interest, and of course his sister, which is Sissy, which is fun because that's what Edgar Allan Poe called Virginia, his wife and cousin. So Sissy has a name, Athena has a name, and Kenneth Dahl is this narcissistic character who is, very focused on himself, but at the same time, he wants to be understood and loved by everybody. So he kind of creates this, like this hamster wheel of events that he really just can't get out of. He is a fun character. He has a lot of identity issues that he is dealing with. I do have fun with the name because, as we know, that Edgar Allan Poe really was into puns.
Yes.
So Kenneth Dahl is obviously like Ken doll, like a Ken doll, like Ken is a beautiful, beautiful man in the book, right? Yes, I mean I designed him to what I find attractive in a man. So he's this beautiful, beautiful man with very feminine features. And, he is misused by a lot of people who meet him because of his beauty. Yeah. They take advantage of that, which, does happen in real life a lot of times to the people who are in that situation.
Very true.
So it's kind of a play on that. So he's beautiful like a Ken doll, but he's also played with and toyed with. And at some point, like, you had enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it goes very well with real life in certain instances, no matter whether you have narcissistic personality or you have the moniker of where you sit with in the beauty realm of what people, attribute true beauty to be, like the perfect blonde hair, blue eyed, might as well go back to Adolf Hitler here, and the super species and something like that. So it just gives an idea that there's so much and so much difficulty that people go through, whether it be with the mental strain and their personality or, their views of the world's views of them. But it fits so perfectly. I'm sorry to say, but it does with Poe. I mean, it is Poe's life in a nutshell. Whereas, he may not have, worried about what he looked like physically because, everybody portrays him as being some sickly kind of mummy throwback. But, but in the instance, he loves and he wants to be loved. And that's pretty much everybody's agenda in life, no matter what the outside looks like or what we may think or feel. Somebody needs to be loved because humanity has to have that connection with someone. And so connecting, whether it be over time, whether it's in reading or writing or whatever, you have to have some connection. And that's the one thing that I've loved about your writing is there is that connection. And somebody can find it, whether it be through the pun or whether it be through the struggles or whatever, or even in the ghost stories and the dark humor, we've talked about this before. The dark humor, Poe is very much the dark humor guy. And I think that's why
Yeah.
I get along so well with his works. But so it is truly something I think that Poe struggled with in real life. I don't see him as being a narcissist, but
Yeah.
Well, it kind of goes back to what he said. This is loosely quoting Edgar Allan Poe, so I'm sorry, but he had said, or it was like in one of his stories, so that's not necessarily his voice. But
Yeah.
he talks about if you have ambition, you'll never be happy. So even like Ken is to anybody else beautiful, but to himself, he really struggles with this image of himself, and he tries to perfect it through doing some weird things in the book, right?
Yeah.
Kind of like you can never, once you have that goal, you reach it and it's not good enough. So you're never happy. And, it kind of goes back to that a little bit too.
Yeah, it's very much Poe-esque in what his real life had to go through. That, yeah, he might had a little bit of a narcissistic personality, but I think it's more if he was extremely critical. We all know that because he was a literary critic. But most times people, if they're very critical of other people, it's because they are so much disappointed in their own life, in their own person of who they are. And so that's why they criticize everything else. And that just goes to show that Poe, being an actual literary critic, most of the time he was criticizing other people's works. In some way, I think he was criticizing his own, saying it'll never be good enough,
Absolutely.
like you said.
Yeah.
We have this idea in our mind and we try to perfect it. But if we try to reach for perfection with the good angel and the bad devil or whatever on each shoulder, they're always going to be at war with each other. And you are stuck in the middle.
Well, and I was going to add to that, Jeannie, that, Poe obviously was very critical of his own work because he edited so many of his things multiple times. And, I've, from reading certain poems and things that were edited 3 or 4 times, I end up liking, I think, the end version better, or somewhere in the middle, maybe not necessarily his first version of things. And so I haven't read every single poem, every version, but it's interesting to do that and compare them and see, it's kind of like, what were you thinking to change it to this? And it would be really an interesting conversation to have with him on that.
Well,
So,
and like Holly was saying, that her book is more in a young adult visionary genre type thing.
yeah,
Even at that age, when we write versus the age maybe 20 years down the road, you can always tell there's going to be a difference. Very few people have the same voice from when they were young to when they're at a certain age.
yeah.
It changes no matter what it takes. And so we're going to go back to Holly. How did you get into writing? And
Yes,
how did you get into your artwork that you
yes.
do for the young children's books?
Well, I would say I was born an artist. And as far as writing, it would be like the very David Copperfield, which would have been accident in nature.
Okay.
Because everyone in my family is an artist of some type. I'm like a flat artist, like I would say, like pencil, charcoal, those kind of things are my kind of like my go-to. My sister and brother are sculptors. My cousin is a sculptor. My mom was a fine artist. Like before you had computers, she would write the letters, like could design those and everything.
Yeah.
Which I am very not good at because I hate rulers. So everyone in my family, yeah, oh my gosh, like I actually go out of my way to make an appointment when I do like the lettering for my children's book covers. I don't use a ruler because I like how it looks. I like the funness. I like the spontaneity of it. So I don't use rulers. It's like my husband was like, "Do you know their eyes are different sizes?" Yeah, that's actually intentional. Yes, I can act. I can actually do fine art. I personally don't like to draw fine art, but I
Yeah.
have actually won art awards in fine art.
That's
You
awesome.
know, but I'm kind of one of those people. I like whimsical art. Art is like music and like books. Everyone has their own flavor that they like. But me personally, I like whimsical because I mean, if it's fine art, then like I can feel sometimes like, oh, I could just take a picture of that. But I kind of like to see people's interpretation on the page is more of what is like my own art thing. But going into writing, it was kind of happened like accidental really. Like I was in a bad place with my job, and I was in a bad place like with my home life and everything. So I actually started doing like therapeutically. I come home from a horrible day at work where I controlled nothing, and like that's the best thing about writing is that you control everything. So it's very very therapeutic. Whether you need to publish it or not, it's really a great thing to do when you're stressed out. So it kind of just started as a fun thing. I was writing for years before I even told my husband.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like it was like top secret. No one knew. Not my sister, like my mom, no one knew. And then when COVID hit, I said to my husband, like, okay, so this is gonna sound really weird, but like I read a whole bunch of books. Like, so I was thinking since I have some time off of my horrible job that I hate, like I was like, why don't I like, and then my husband was like very like, okay, well, if you're gonna do this, you need to be very serious about this. You need to like look into what you really need to do and do your research, blah 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 blah, which I did because I'm always constantly trying to improve my craft. I came from a non-English background, so a lot of things that I guess are standard to people who were English majors, like works that were standard. I don't come from that background. I am a science dork, which you can see in my books. I pull a lot of science. I use science to back everything up because I feel like, it's kind of like you can't have good without evil. You can't have fantasy without it have some sort of scientific foundation. For me, otherwise it's just you can't suspend belief to make that work. So it has to have some sort of
reality
foundation in the real world for me.
Yeah.
Yep.
And a lot of great writers were science. Like Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was a doctor. Alan King, the father of the RPG, he was a medical doctor before he gave it up to be a full-time author. So having a science background doesn't really hurt you as a writer. I think it gives you a different approach to writing maybe than someone from a literary background. So I mean, I kind of came from that situation, and I dropped the bomb on my husband. So I read a couple books to my family members. Because before that, like I did like insurance narratives at work, and I used to do some ghostwriting for extra money, like recommendation letters and essays and stuff for money and whatnot. But so I read my first book. They're like, you can write. I was like, well, I don't know if I can or not. I was like, but I enjoy it, so I mean that was years ago. So I mean this has been a long time coming. Like I said, years before I think it was 3 years before I told my husband I wrote a book.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it was like top secret because with any type of artist, right? It's very hard to share that because you're sharing a piece of yourself.
Yes.
Whether it's photography, a drawing picture, writing, but for something about writing, I know Jeanie and Carmen, we had this conversation before with the kids wanting to enter the poetry contest for the Poet Like Poe. It's very hard to let people read it because more than art, I think people have understanding with art. Like art can be different to other people for some reason. Literature or English, like even when it comes to writing essays, isn't really viewed like that. There's less of this variance. It's like it's either good or it's bad. There's no gray area.
That's true. And it doesn't have to be that way. It can be your own interpretation.
Yeah. And for someone like me, that's like when you go about rating books or like I have never read a 1-star book. Never. I mean, because I kind of feel like if you got me to finish the book, well, it couldn't have been that bad, right? But it's kind of like that, like it's weird, like growing up and taking English classes, I had some English professors who everything I wrote was an A. And I had others where I couldn't get an A. And I mean, I was like an all A student. So for me not to get, because I'm neurotic. So for me not to get, the people who know me personally know this O2L. Like if I don't get like 100 or an A, like I'm freaking out. Like I'm actually I cry. Like I will go home and cry over it. And I have to, and I don't understand it. So that happened to me in English a lot. Like particularly this one professor, like I think I only got like an A minus on one thing I did, and I ended up getting like a B plus in the class, and I was like, you know, but then when I was really young, I guess in 8th grade, my English teacher pulled me aside and said that I was talented as a writer and said I should enter some of these contests, which I did because she wanted me to. I didn't win any, but she probably would have been Miss 100. She probably would have been the only one who kind of, I guess, saw any sort of like talent to be nurtured. I would say would be her.
Yeah, I had a similar I won't say a problem, but an an attitude or thing when I'm from one of my English teachers. It's like every time I had a problem in school, it was with an English teacher. And it wasn't because I wasn't performing great or I wasn't making the grade or everything. It was always I was getting fussed at for not living up to my potential.
Yeah.
And it was like, come on, all right. I'm a teenager. What am I going to do? I'm not going to go into becoming a writer or anything like that because where I grew up, education was not viewed as a good thing. In my background, my family, we only went to school because the state made us go. And so because after I graduated, I proceeded to, some of my family called it, make a career out of going to school. Because even my aunts and uncles would ask me, are you ever going to decide what you want to be when you grow up and make a decision? And I'm like, what are you talking about? I've been working a job for 20 years, and just because I go to school doesn't mean anything. And it wasn't, and this is not anything knocking on the profession, but it was not until I actually got my teaching degree and my teaching license that my family finally told me to my face, I'm glad you decided what you wanted to be, and now you can stop goofing off. And I'm like, I would think that, man, working my butt off all these years and having doing my writing, or I draw some, but I don't like make it a big thing because I don't like to draw as much as I love to write. That's kind of my thing. I mostly like to take pictures, but it's here anyway. So it is a view. It is a view that people have when it comes to whether it's art or whether it's not, or reading something. Now, I have been known to be accused by some of my friends as being a literature snob, but that's not saying that I don't like to read. I love to read, but I am very particular about what I read.
I
And
am
I don't
too.
like,
I'm not gonna lie.
yeah, but I don't like when trendy authors, when it's supposed to be on trend, when they come out with this and they suddenly turn it into a movie and all this, and all you're doing is sitting there going, we've already had this. It's already been written, it's already been published, and you're just making it look worse. It's like, I'm not going to say the name of the series that came out, but it was based off a philosophical story that was written in the early 1900s. It had all the same hallmarks of exactly the same thing. But suddenly this author was being praised for her ideas and, all of her things. And I'm going, she didn't do that. That's not what it is. So the one thing that coming back around to this is what I want to say is that, Holly, whether it's your artwork, whether it's your writing or whatever, it's very you. It's very unique. It's very interesting. Yeah,
And
see?
very awesome.
So
Yes, because your children's books are amazing too.
Yes, and I mean that is when it comes to visual art, like you said, it is an interpretation of what someone wants.
Yeah.
I'm like you when I see some of the fine artists that they've just recreated or they've just done the same thing as somebody else. And I'm like, oh, I just took a picture. That's fine. Yeah.
And it
But
takes
when
an
you put
exceptional
your
amount
own,
of skill to do that, though. At the same token,
yeah.
I mean,
Oh,
that's
yeah.
and
Yeah.
patience beyond
Hmm.
what I have.
Yeah. But I
Mhm.
mean, skill and talent is definitely there for anybody who does fine art. But I guess what I'm trying to say is if you give up a part of who you are in what you do to make it look like somebody else's, that to me is not you being true to yourself.
Yeah.
I guess that's what I'm trying to get it down to.
Yeah,
And, not
like
everybody's gonna
writing,
like it. You gotta live with that.
like you
So
were saying,
whether
Jeannie,
it's
right.
yeah.
Like writing is subjective, right? Science,
Mhm.
there's a right answer or a wrong answer.
Mhm.
And
Yep.
with English, or any sort of literature, there's so much gray in that, even though we judge it with less on a gray scale. So it's kind
Yeah.
of
No, yeah.
almost it's kind of topsy turvy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like
Oh,
all the
absolutely.
social sciences. It's like the social sciences and the humanities and stuff that has to be subjective because if the human is making the decision, it's not always going to equal out to what everybody thinks.
Yeah.
That's why it's called a humanity because
Oh,
there's no
yes.
two humans that are like. Thank God. Just saying. Just saying. Now, because I mean, if we think about Poe, if there'd been two Poes, it'd be like, no, no, no,
Ooh,
no, no.
if Poe was a twin.
Okay, that's even more
Okay,
disturbing.
so true story. Like people
Uh-oh.
who know me know that I'm obsessed with twins. That you don't have to be identical. If you're identical, you're a bonus. Like I just did that Edgar Allan Poe event, and the guy next to me he had twin daughters. I was like, I love twins. Like I just
Oh,
love
that's
twins.
cool. Yeah.
Like when I had like my day job, when my patients would come in, and I had a couple that I had these two boys. I like they were in their 20s. So it was nothing weird or anything like that, but they were twins. And oh my God, I would just ask them the most bizarre questions because I'm very interested in that twin connection.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And like it's real, right? I mean, they say like they have like close to like 98% identical genetic material. Goes into like if one has like an autoimmune disease, then the other one will most likely also have it, even if they don't,
Mhm.
they're not together and whatnot. So I'm very interested in that connection of twins, which plays into in the book
Mhm.
which goes to the fall of House of Usher with Roderick and Madeline Usher. And also, which I think is kind of interesting in the fall of House of Usher story, it's kind of like it's a very quick moment in the short story. It's when the narrator is going to meet Roderick for the first time when he's brought in. He kind of passes the doctor on the stairs, and they
Mhm.
have this very weird interaction, which almost gave me the sense of like, oh, the doctor's keeping him sick. So that's kind of how
Mhm.
like just with my personal like my life, how I kind of perceive that moment. And I kind of do that in my book with the doctor as well, that this
Yeah.
doctor is maybe like making things worse, which is also a play on his other short story, the system of Dr. Tar and Professor Fetter.
Yes.
So that plays into that as well. But yeah, that moment with the doctor, it was kind of always one of those moments where I was like, when they said that Mike Flanagan was going to do Fall of House of Usher, I thought he was going to really play on that moment because that moment is such a quick moment in the story, even though it ended
Mhm.
up not being anything based off those characters really. But I was thinking like, man, like if I wanted to exploit something in that story and make it something, it's like the doctor's bad. The doctor's doing something he shouldn't be doing. You
Yes.
know,
Yes. Very unethically. Yes.
yeah, and that's always fun because like that story is kind of supposed to be like a funny story, the system of Dr. Tar, but
Mhm.
it's like really it's actually so scary. Like it's actually
Mhm.
back in the day, my brother was in film school, and this is before internet, guys, because I'm old, and he would have to get like these black and white movies to watch. And at the time, I didn't
Mhm.
realize this was based off of that Edgar Allan Poe story, but it was a black and
Oh.
white about this woman who goes to this insane asylum. And the whole time she's in there thinking that she's talking to the doctor, he's actually talking to the inmate who took over the place. He was pretend to be the head doctor. It was the scariest thing one of the scariest things I've ever seen. I've tried to find it since because I don't know what it was called. But the concept of it is terrifying. Like, I mean, think about it. If you actually thought you were talking to a doctor and it was actually like an insane person.
Yeah.
I mean, Edgar Allan Poe, that is some scary stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. That almost reminds me a little bit. Didn't that happen? Did you watch the TV show Gotham when they're in Arkham? Is that right? Yeah.
Arkham. It's Arkham Asylum.
Thank you. My brain's tired.
I think that's the series I started watching and I didn't care for it all at all. I think it's the one I didn't watch.
I almost want to say somebody pretended to be the doctor or something at one point in that. It's been a while since I've watched the whole thing, and it got better as it went along. But yeah, and
I'm trying to think of the actor that's in it because I could tell you. He was like a teeny. He was like one of those heartthrob actors.
Yeah, he was, and I can't remember.
And he played Gordon, right? He played Gordon.
Yes.
Okay, so I did start watching that. Okay, so I'm a hardcore Batman girl. Like, hardcore. Like, I met my husband dressed as Poison Ivy, and he was dressed as Robin, right? So I'm like a hardcore Batman girl, and it didn't meet my expectations. I watched all sorts of weird stuff, Gaslight Batman, and this, and like, I don't know, like, I'm hard to please when it comes to Batman because I am too much of a fan.
Okay.
I'm right there with you.
Yeah. But anyway, that just, I don't know, that just went to my brain when you were talking about that. And I think that like happened within one of the seasons, maybe just an episode or something. But yeah, that's just so surrealistic too.
Well, when you think about it,
Jeanie was saying. Oh, I'm sorry, Jeanie, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, kind of what you're saying about like, like taking other people's ideas, because there's like kind of like something that the writers say, like everything's been done, right? You just have to like basically take it, make it your own, give it like a fresh spin. Because I always say to my husband, like, I'll think of this really amazing idea, and then I'll be damned if someone else didn't think of it too, right? And I'm like, oh shoot. Like, or I'll write something and be like, oh my gosh, that's so much like my idea. And you're like, like, but at the end of the day, like, that's why they have like those, like, you know, they call them tropes, right? Certain like readers' expectations that you meet. And people, unfortunately, if you don't have these things in this book, like, that readers are going to be unhappy. But it's like, how many books do you want to read that are like enemies to lovers? But that's what readers want. You just have to try to create that new spin on it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you go ahead, Jeanie.
No, I was just going to say, it goes back to when I was working on my first master's degree. One of my studies on independent studies was talking about formulaic fiction. And, you know, anything of any genre, especially of literature, has some kind of formulaic layout of, if it's a mystery, you got to have a bad guy and a good guy. If, you know, something like that. So the formula is not the problem. So, because like Holly said, it's been done, somebody's already done it, you just have to figure out a way to take the formula and recreate it in your own eyes. Because this goes back to the science thing.
Yeah.
You know, I taught science too. And, you know, science is a very real cut and dry as it goes. You know, one or the other. You can't really have more than one unless you have a mutation. So that brings into consideration of, guess what? You have a mutation, you have something new, but it came from something old.
Yeah.
So that's okay. And that's what you need to remember, especially with any art form, whether it be writing, whether it be art itself. It can be surrealism, it can be anything, but you have to remember it came from somewhere first. You just have to make sure that you put you in it and make it your own.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Like Carmen, like what you said, like, I do have some real quotes from Edgar Allan Poe in the story.
Yes.
And I wasn't sure when I originally wrote it, they were not in there. So I approached this book I approached it like this, right? I have a very strong foundation in Edgar Allan Poe. I participate in your guys' weekly Poem Plug, which is great. If you're listening, haven't, make sure you listen or join us where we talk about a different story each month. But so I didn't do any extra additional research for the book. Well, for
Mm-hmm.
2 reasons. I do have that foundation, and I didn't want anything too fresh in my head, because I wanted it to be my interpretation, inspired by. I didn't want to be trying to compare myself. If I would have done that, I never would have wrote the book, because
Right.
obviously I'm not Edgar Allan Poe. I don't write like Edgar Allan Poe. It never would have happened. It never would have got written.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of lost my train of thought, but yeah, so that was basically, so so then I wrote the book out, and I was like, well, do I really want to do exact quotes from him, right? So I kind of put where I thought I might want them, some key ones that
Yeah.
I would say that everyone knows, and maybe some that people don't know. And then after the book was all done, I kind of, my memory is not as good as I like to think it is. I was like, wow, these are really, really off. And then I fixed them to make them to be the actual real thing. I mean, there's a couple of there in there, but I think it's nice because I felt it fit into the story, but
I think the way you place them in there, it fits perfectly with just, the lines of dialogue or any kind of how you use them. And it was very fitting for the moments in the story that you chose very well. And I really enjoyed that. And so it's like, I don't know, it was like when I would see the italics come up, I'm like, I don't know, it was like almost the narrator in my head changed from like your voice to Poe's voice, like you were reading it together to me in my head. And so that was just a very cool, comforting thing.
Very cool. Yeah, well, I'm glad that happened for you. That's very cool. It's good to know.
Yeah, because I definitely have a voice in my head when I'm reading, and I think that's why I like to listen to audiobooks so much, because it just, especially when, oh, Jeanie, I don't know what you're shaking your head about, but
audiobooks.
But especially when there is a really good reader, there is nothing better. I have just finished the 9th book in this series called the Heathcliff Lennox murder mysteries, and Karen Ball Menuhin is the author, and I can't remember, it's Sam Dewhurst, I think, is the reader. His voice is, it's a British accent. It's amazing. And I've listened to 9 of those books. It's really cool. So
I mean, it definitely adds a dimension, right?
Yeah.
I love audiobooks. My big thing is, well, I have a hearing deficit, so I don't like when there's a lot of music. Sometimes they'll put like that first chapter to music, and it's hard for me to hear, even though I know most people can hear it. So, but that's my only issue with that. From that perspective, which people probably don't even think about. Like, then you probably, if you had a hearing problem, you wouldn't be listening to an audiobook.
Yeah, that makes sense though. Yeah.
But I love them. It adds a dimension as long as you have but it does, it's kind of like they are acting it out. So I mean, it definitely puts their spin on those words.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So
saying there's anything wrong with audiobooks. I just am not the type of person that can listen to audiobooks. They put me to sleep. If you want me to go to sleep quicker than anything, flip on an audiobook, I'm out. Because it's like, you guys were talking about the voices in our heads. I mean, that just sounds weird when you say it out loud like that, but well, we all have voices in our heads. Some of us more than most. But but when I'm reading, it's like when I'm reading, it's like the voices are acting it out in my mind.
Yeah.
But when I'm listening to it, it's like that voice is overriding everything and just blocking it for me. Okay. And that's why I
part
can't
of the creativity away from you and putting it onto the voice actor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can see both sides of the, the fence
the
on
coin.
this. Yeah, absolutely.
And it works. It works either way. I mean, it's like we've been talking about most of the night. You either like it or you don't with most of the things. So that's okay.
It's not for everybody. Well, Holly, one of the questions kind of coming back, to Poe. So what was like your first interaction with Poe? Like, was it in middle school? I mean, we always assume that it was kind of middle school, junior high or whatever, but you know, some people earlier, some people later. So we'd like to hear about it.
Yeah, sure. Actually, for me, it was 7th grade.
Okay.
In our English class, it was kind of when they were trying to introduce public speaking. So they wanted us to select a poem and recite it in front of the class. So for me, like we have one of those big textbooks, and I picked out Bells by Edgar Allan Poe. At the time, I thought it was the whole poem. It seemed very long when you were 7th grade. Like it was just a little excerpt though. And I memorized it because again, I have to have an A. So I basically, cause I'm very dramatic, you know, so I kind of like did the whole thing, and you know, it's very fun. It's that poem is designed to be read out loud.
Yeah.
So I read it out loud, and you know, since then he's kind of always stuck with me. You know, I mean, I love the dark and unusual, and again, I'm like the most cliche Edgar Allan Poe fan you will find because I love him for being gothy and dark and moody and melancholy. These are all things that you know I love about him. I really think if he was in today, like yeah, they say he always wore black. It could have been because of his financial situation to keep it clean,
Right.
or but you know, he was actually becoming a character, right? He wanted people to see him as this dark moody character, and that image, you know, really has like continued to live on. And it's again like for me, that's what I like. I have read, I don't want to say I've read everything he has written because that would be a lie, but I've read all his short stories, I've read all his poems multiple times, I've read his novel. I've read some of the letters, some of the critiques. I kind of, that's heavy reading, so I have to be in the mood to do that. And I was kind of doing the critiques, like how do you read a critique on something you haven't read? So I was kind of going back and doing that. But yeah, I mean, I love him for the dark and the goth. I mean, I love goth guys. I like the alternative culture, and I like to think if he was alive, he'd be wearing eyeliner right now.
Yep.
He probably would.
Yep. He would. He would fit that perfect goth genre, especially for most of us that grew up in when you grew up in the 80s.
Yeah.
Born earlier, but you know, teenager in the 80s. So guys wearing eyeliner and you know makeup and all long hair and all that was the style back then. So the only thing I could not picture is Edgar Allan Poe with long hair. I don't think he would fit that close to a headbanger, but he would. I could definitely see him wearing the eyeliner, the charcoal eyeliner, and you know having the fingerless gloves. Yeah.
Oh my
He would fit in
gosh.
our world. That would definitely so.
But I'm funny because like I do like a lot of his like funny stories. You heard me say like the spectacles. I like love that story, and I play on that a little bit actually in my book. I have a little bit of fun with that with the grandma with glasses. But yeah, like at the end of the day, you know, stereotypes come from real places, cliches come from real places, and like some of those stories, I mean, they're just his more horror stories are just I don't know. They just have a little bit of something for me that the other ones just don't have. It just could maybe be my personality. I tend to lean towards the dark versus the light. But yeah.
Nothing wrong with that.
No, not at all.
And I say most cliche Edgar Allan Poe fan ever.
That is okay. You know, because Edgar Allan Poe was the epitome of the Gothic writer, and he loved his dark humor. He loved his darkness, his horror, and all that. The true horror. I'm gonna call it true horror, not like some of the horror movies that we are subjected to.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to go into that. So.
Well, I was gonna say, I think Jeanie, what it sounds like you're saying is like the gothic horror,
psychological.
It's true horror to me.
Yeah, it's,
you know, things that are so close to true life is what true horror is.
Yeah, and that you kind of like, I'm going to use this analogy, like in the movie Jaws, you don't see the shark until almost the very end of the movie. Yep. It's that fear of the unknown that Poe builds up to, and then it like is, you know, comes out at the very end, like in the Black Cat.
It's the psychological suspense.
I've always said that too. like with like horror movies with me, if you have like I love, don't get me wrong, I love demons, but like I love demons. But if you show me like a demon on the big screen and he looks like he
Yeah.
doesn't look like a person and he's all like red or some other color, to me I'm like, that's silly.
Yeah.
Like I feel like real fear like comes from a real place, comes from real like people. It's kind of like for example, you know what, it was the Shining movie, but not the Stanley Kubrick one. It was the one that was made for the TV. I don't think you guys seen that one.
I think I have seen parts of that one.
The guy who plays the guy with the wolf mask, he has to be the scariest human being ever. Like to me, he is so much scarier than anything you could make on a computer or with artifacts. Like people are scary. Like use real people. That's how I've always felt that way.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, and I think both movies adaptations of The Shining are scarier than the book.
Yeah.
I just, and I know we're getting away from Poe again, but
you know, because he is like, I mean, like kind of like Edgar Allan Poe. They would say like, you know, he is made to be acted out and seen and experienced. And you know, Stephen King is, you know, is also a lot like that. That's why so many of his things have been made into movies. You know, because he paints this picture for you, and sometimes, you know, seeing it actually for some people, because you know some people cannot build, even though he's known for his world building, and so is Edgar Allan Poe. Some people just are not able to produce that world in their head, and it's great to see it. Big screen.
Yeah,
absolutely.
They lack the imagination.
Yeah. Well, one thing I want to mention too, before we wrap everything up, is that Holly is not only a judge for our poetry contest coming up, she is also a sponsor. And so she very graciously donated a copy of Eye of Athena and some of her children's books for some of the prizes. And so we thank you so much for that, Holly.
Yeah, you're very welcome. I hope they go. I know they'll go to a very talented poet.
Yes, absolutely. And where can we find Eye of Athena for our listeners and watchers. Or viewers? I always want to say watchers, and I always think of Dean Koontz's book, The Watchers, or The Watcher, or whatever.
At least we're not calling them voyeurs, so that's good.
Okay, yeah, we're not going there, Jeannie.
Yeah, sure. So you can find Eye of Athena anywhere you can buy books. So anywhere online. The ebook is exclusive to Amazon. So sorry, but you have to get it through Amazon if you're an ebook person. But any the other books you can get anywhere else.
Okay, awesome.
Very cool.
Jeannie?
Yeah, and your website is for your children's books and stuff. Is it Holly Michelle?
You know what? So okay. So I people who know me know how much I hate social media. I think it's killing the world. As much as like the world is large and it makes it small, there's also a lot of bad things that come from social media. So even though I find myself needing to be on there because I need to have an online presence, I despise it, and so I had a separate long story short, I no longer have an exclusive website just for my children's books. I kind of combined them under the adult one because at the end of the day, like most people aren't following children's authors. It's kind of like they buy, they go, you know, even with the kids series, you know, they buy one, they may not buy the others, and that's I understand why, I get that. So it's everything's under hollyknightley.com. Knightley is spelled KNIGHTLEY. Holly HOLLY. But yeah, you can just basically, it just takes you to a link, which will just take you to the Amazon, so you can just shop directly from Amazon. Most of them do have like pictures. You can get a little, make sure. I'm very big on that. I want people to like the books before they buy them. So I don't try, like, I try to give you pictures of the kids' books so you kind of know what you're getting in on with those. Because, you know, I write unique books as well, but spooky books for kids is always, is hard, you know, every kid's different. What one kid's scared of, the other one is not scared of. They're all children friendly. They're meant to be family friendly. But at the end of the day, you know, if you have a kid that's dark, if
Yeah.
then they'll like them. If you have a kid that's, you know, hair and pigtails and wearing neon pink, they're probably not the kid that's gonna like my book, you know. And that goes to that goes probably for the adult as well.
That's
Probably.
I can always tell one of my readers, by seeing them before, like if they're gonna buy a book beforehand.
oh goodness.
Yeah. Yeah, they don't have that weird vibe right away. So yeah.
Well, you know, when you said weird, right? So like most kids grow up like my age group reading Goosebumps, but I actually was reading an author called by Dean Marney, and he wasn't about scary. He was actually about strangeness. He created these weird kind of supernatural strange stories for young kids. And that's actually what I aim to do in all my books. I'm not really interested in horror per se. Like I like to create awkward, strange moments. And that's what I enjoy in a book. So that's really what when I set out to write a book, the kind of mode I'm always going with is strangeness. It's just because I just think it's kind of like that's what inspires me too, right? I write a story based off of either I meet someone who strikes me as like, oh, they're unique, or I see something, or I get a feeling when I see something, and it's those weird little moments that kind of inspire me to write the stories that I write.
That's cool. Well, just like with the house next door and everything. That's so cool.
And going back really quick, because I know we've been talking for a while, with like the Riley House book, it is about the haunted teacup. But like what spawned as my mother-in-law, the cup is actually in my house, right? So I live in the house where the main character lives is my house. And my mother-in-law was here because they left us all this stuff when they moved out, tons of stuff. And there was this really weird, tiny bone china teacup. And I remember my mother-in-law really looking at it, examining this teacup.
Oh, wow.
And she like saw the name at the bottom, and she's like, this teacup is really special. And it was actually that weird little moment, because it was like because here I'm watching her watch this teacup, examine it. I'm like, this is such a weird moment. I was like, and that's what all like the same, like all the stories are basically based off of weird moments. Like all the inspiration that happens to Ken, some of the torture scenes, like some of them actually not in that extreme, like have actually happened to myself in a different way. And I kind of go on those strange moments that I had to kind of give Ken his own strange moments.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, that's I love it.
Yep. So that sounds like a good idea to me. Just follow Holly Knightley and find her wonderful works. And if you are, loving the weirdness and the Poe-ness and everything in between, you fit right there. So that's where you need to be.
Yeah, he's one of my biggest inspirations. So if I'm Eye of Athena is actually a little bit different than my normal writing. That's a little more philosophical than I normally write, just because the character required that he was a philosophical character. Riley House, you can get it for free, like I said, on my newsletter, on my website. So you don't have to be book shy. If you like it, great. If not, hey, delete it. If you like it, maybe read Eye of Athena. I think that's a little more true to my writer's voice. I have multiple books coming out. I have another 4 or 5. I have another 6 books coming out this year. So
that's awesome.
So there's gonna be. I'm totally crazy. I actually finished a book today, so I was like, I'm taking off tomorrow. I'm like a workaholic. I'm so crazy. I work all day long and all night long.
That's amazing. Well, I guess when you get in that mode, I know when I'm doing my own writing, if I'm like in the mode, doesn't matter what time it is, I just keep writing. So
yeah, unfortunately my husband, he can sleep through, seriously, we had a tree fall in our yard and he slept through it. But if I'm typing in the middle of the night, he hears it and he wakes and he's looking at me. I was like, do not put a pillow there. Do not look at me while I'm typing. It's weird. I don't like it. I was like, so now, because my husband is in the military, so he's away a lot, or he used to be. But now that he's home, I'm like, Matt, this is my writing time. Because sometimes when you go to sleep, right, some of those things that maybe weren't connecting during the day, seem to always come to me at night.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, that's awesome. I need to write down. And even though if you think you're going to remember it, you never really do. So now I just get in the habit. If something comes to me, I have a little thing, and I was just like, make sure you add this. Make sure you add this. And sometimes I will just stay up and write it, especially if he's in a deeper sleep. Or if I just don't care, I just wake them up.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
That's right.
Well, I have Google Keep on my phone, and my husband and I use it like for grocery lists to share, but we also have other lists too. But anytime I think of an idea for a poem or a book or anything like that, I put it in my Keep. And I told Jeff that if anybody found my phone and did not know me and we were able to unlock it and see the keeps, they'd be
Serial
like,
killer?
yes, demented, crazy. Oh,
Normal.
yeah.
So that's the thing.
Yeah, for our
Mhm.
Poe side of the world, normal. Yeah.
Oh, I'm the same way. I have book ideas. I have names. I just got a new name the other day. I was like, oh, I love this name.
Oh,
I like,
cool.
yeah, I have a name list. I have book idea list. Yeah, I'm the same way.
Mhm.
Very cool.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, Jeannie, do you
Well,
have anything else that you
nope. I
wanna?
think I've covered all the things that I wanted to cover. So
Yeah, me too. And Holly, it was so awesome to be able to talk to you tonight and
yep.
share with all of our listeners and viewers that, check out your
Mhm.
books and just go find Holly Knightley. She's amazing.
Oh, thank you
Yes,
guys. I really
absolutely.
appreciate you having me. Thanks for
Yeah.
letting me talk about my book. Hopefully some people will check it out and find it interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And go check out our website, 6degreesofpoe.com/poet like Poe poetry contest. And the live link will be up for you to submit your poems on April 1st. So that's adults and youth. So make sure you do that. Start writing now.
Exactly. All right. Well,
Yes.
without any
Further ado,
we are Poe
oh, out.
There we go.